Hello, this is Duncan Lievi, and this is the SummerSlam 2020 recap slash review, not to mention spoilers ahead. Starting with the obvious, Roman Reigns is back. Okay, so that was essentially why You'll Never See It Coming was there. That's what we found out. It was introduced into the lexicon of the event because of Randy Orton's RKO out of nowhere, You'll Never See It Coming, and then it was probably made also part of the speculation that people had about Braun Strowman versus the Fiend, and then ultimately it served to enhance the wow factor of Roman Reigns' return from self-imposed hiatus. And of course he's in the Universal Championship scene automatically because he was supposed to beat Goldberg, that's known by everyone, but he returned around SummerSlam, so that's a very timely return. I believe SmackDown ratings and WWE YouTube views are going to take not a hit, the opposite. They're going to spike up. Now, getting back to the actual event, more toward that, results and comparisons from my predictions as well. I had a decent outing, but there were a few swerves, and I wasn't disappointed by most of them. So in that just says that the event was good, essentially. So quick results are now. Bayley versus Asuka for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Bayley returns after Sasha Banks takes the figurative bullet, and Bayley pins Asuka. And after that, Banks versus Asuka follows, not immediately, later in the night, but the result of that match is that in a similar spot, Bayley's not able to take the bullet for Sasha, and that leads to Asuka locking in the Asuka lock, causing Banks to tap out, which led to lots of disappointment, sad. And ultimately, your new Raw Women's Champion, Asuka. So those two I got right. MVP versus Apollo Crews, this was part of the pre-show, and this went exactly as almost everyone predicted. MVP lost, Crews won. There's essentially nothing else to say about that. Crews has that powerbomb finish, which is nice. Should bode well for his character ahead. Mandy Rose versus Sonya Deville. Mandy won, just as everyone was expecting, because of the real-life situation, I believe, that Deville wants to take some time off, maybe heal up at home. Not literal injury heal up, but emotional scarring, probably, because of the stalker situation. Now to the matches that I got wrong. Street Profits versus Zelina's Boys. I predicted Garza and Andrade because I wanted them to win, and I also thought that it was time for a bit of a change, but WWE, in this case, disappointed, and the Street Profits just won again. There's just nothing there. There are no challengers who are believable in the tag team division on Raw because the champions just always keep winning, and when they're not essentially in a match, they're doing some cinematic stupidity. It's not even good cinematic stuff. Anyway, followed by a finish that I got wrong, but I happily got wrong. In the predictions, I did two categories. One is what I wanted to see happen, and the other was what I think was going to happen. I thought Seth versus Dominick was going to result in Dominick winning because of the real sympathetic narrative that he was a part of, but instead they maintained the integrity of the superstar that was there, the biggest star in the entire program, that is Seth Rollins. And Seth Rollins and Dominic delivered a fantastic match, actually. Lots of momentum changes and not a single dull moment. There was a lot of intense symbolism and a lot of taunting from Seth Rollins, who was benefiting from the fact that Mysterio and Ray and Dominic had a deal because Dominic told his father not to intervene at all because he wanted to do it by himself. He wanted to participate in his debut match all by himself. Good babyface attributes being displayed, and Seth was constantly mocking Ray when attacking Dominic, saying that, "Oh, Ray, you can't do anything about this." But anyway, the match was fantastic. And that next result is another one that I got wrong, but again, happily wrong. I wanted McIntyre to get that feather in his cap, and he got it. I predicted Orton to win, and I got this wrong as well. And finally, we had the Fiend win the match against Strowman in a very finisher-heavy, kicking out of each other's finishers match. And Fiend won. But the biggest talking point after this event would be the fact that Roman Reigns returned and he speared the Fiend twice, and he speared Braun Strowman once, and lots of Hail Marys on both, after which he proceeded to hoist the championship on top of his shoulders, symbolizing his re-entry into the Universal Championship scene. Now we're going to dissect maybe all of the matches. Why not? Let's do this. So Bayley versus Asuka began the night. Rightfully so. It was a good match. It was a really good match. I think Bayley's character work, even inside the ring, has become really impressive in the sense that she can convey almost every emotion, but it's still true to her character. It's always going to be something annoying, and she's going to mock her opponent because she thinks she's better, but at the same time, when she's in a tough spot, she's going to resort to underhanded tactics. And of course, Banks complements that very well, and Banks allowed Bayley to escape with a victory. This is all in good service to the overarching narrative, because Bayley has a championship reign which is almost a year. The integrity of that reign is fantastic. It's a lineage that Bayley is almost single-handedly established. So it's great, because that is the championship that eventually Sasha and Bayley are going to feud over, and it's going to be amazing. And the championship changing hands, if and when that happens, it's going to mean that much more. Now, the other match with this storyline was Banks versus Asuka, and these two matches, I believe, went as most people predicted. Banks and Asuka had, again, a good back and forth. It was a good match. It was up to the mark. I mean, there's nothing bad you can say about the match, because these two share such great chemistry in the ring together. There was lots of back and forth, and Banks also got a few hits in. What I wanted to see happen, not my official prediction, I still got it right, predicting Asuka to win, but I wanted to see Banks get a successful title defense. But in a way, she's padding her title totals, the number of titles that she's won, and because she loses them so soon, she's in a position to win her next one very quickly. And given the current trajectory of her storyline, she's going to be in a position to win the SmackDown one. So she's going to be a 6-time champion, presumably, by WrestleMania maybe next year, or even before, who knows. So I'm really looking forward to how they are going to handle the brewing conflict between Bayley and Banks, especially now that one of them is not holding 2 belts anymore. Moving on, it was MVP versus Cruz. There isn't much to say about this. I've already talked about this, so I'm going to move on to Mandy Rose versus Sonya Deville. The match is good. I thought Mandy Rose would have a little bit more intense agenda through her demeanor and her mannerisms, and there was at points, but it was I thought it was a bit of a scattered performance in that the intensity was not there throughout. Sonya Deville, on the other hand, was very expressive and sometimes a bit over-expressive for my taste, but she's doing exactly how her character would, so from that perspective, it was really good. And the correct person won, in the sense that Deville had to go away, but I would have preferred Deville to go over in a perfect world, because she needed the win, and after winning, Mandy Rose can just return to being off-screen with Otis, and Deville can proceed to own the SmackDown Women's Division. But that didn't happen, and at the end, Otis showed up, embraced Mandy, and then they both just disappeared into obscurity, in which they've been for a while. Street Profits versus Andrade and Angel Garza. Good match, decent match. How can you go wrong with this match? It's been done so many times before. There was no freshness there. I think they are in desperate need to get new challengers. I wanted Andrade and Garza to win the championship so they get something off of the storyline. The poisoning angle, I believe, just was there to have at least something extra going into the storyline to hype it up. Oh, there's something new that happened. Otherwise, it's the same match with the same 4 people and the same 2 people winning. So the variety is at an all-time low. Anyway, I hope that there's some new injection of characters, some new teams, or just new champions. I'm not a huge fan of Street Profits. I think everyone who's ever heard me talking about them knows that I love the talent of the two gentlemen involved, but there's a ceiling to those kinds of characters. Same with Otis, to another separate degree, in a separate type. It's still comical. You cannot take that seriously. Chris Jericho always says, right, that can you envision this person as a world champion in their current incarnation? For example, Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was a ringmaster. The new WWE champion. The ringmaster. That doesn't have a ring to it, especially with the gimmick as well. You can't see that. I believe the same is true for Otis. And even Montez Ford, Angelo Dawkins, they're just so... We want the smoke, yo, 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 it's just not there. I can't take them seriously. So it just devalues the whole championship scene and everyone involved, unfortunately for me. Even the Viking Raiders, they're just beating up some people in Raw Underground, nothing else. Anyway, moving on to Seth Rollins versus Dominic Mysterio. Probably the second best match of the night, but in terms of twists and turns and emotional weight, this was easily at the top. I wanted Seth Rollins to win, but I thought they were going to go with Dominic, but they managed it really well. Seth was also taunting Dominic's mom, Ray's wife. So that was also... There was a moment where there was a hint that Seth might go after her, the Dominic's mom, and that's when I thought, okay, are they actually going to go in this territory? But something that has really evolved through this entire Messiah character for Seth Rollins is that he is at his absolute peak in terms of character work. Sometimes there was a bit of cringiness involved in his delivery, and you can still detect traces of it once in a while, but from a general point of view, Seth Rollins is a master of his craft, and he's becoming a more and more refined heel that people would just generally despise. Classic heat that he is able to generate. So that match itself, though, with its twists and turns, Dominic Mysterio had an amazing showing. He should be very proud of his performance. The action was fluid and well paced. The match had its ups and downs, like I said. Murphy's involvement was also there, but I think this was one of the matches in which Byron Saxton's commentary was a bit off-putting. Not too much, but just in places that I remember, because the family angle was played up a little too much, and even in instances where it wasn't justified, in my opinion, of course, because Rey Mysterio had told Dominic that he was not going to intervene on his son's behalf because he's a babyface. So, of course, he has to make that deal with his father. But when Murphy was holding Dominic down and doing the same "I'll gouge your eyes out" spot with Dominic, Rey intervened, and then Byron said something like, Rey could not keep his word to his son. Not really, because it wasn't Seth Rollins doing it. And then Seth Rollins started beating Rey Mysterio, and that's when all four men sort of became part of the action involved. And Dominic was also flying around doing some 619s. But at the end, the lasting visual was that Rey Mysterio was handcuffed to the ring ropes, left to watch. First, Seth Rollins threatened to go after his wife, which didn't happen, thankfully. Dominic stopped him. And then he delivered a 619, was about to deliver a splash, but Seth Rollins got his knees up, and then proceeded to taunt Rey, forcing Rey to watch him deliver a very vicious-looking stomp on Dominic, after which he pinned Dominic. But the match itself, beautiful. Perfect. As well as it could have gone. I'm glad to be proven wrong about Dominic not winning. After that, I would have liked to talk about McIntyre versus Orton as the main event of the night because of the weight of the match, but it was not the main event. It was the next to closing, as they say. It was next to closing, but easily the match of the night. I like to preface this by saying that such good twists and turns, heavy hitting, and lots of psychology involved, as is typical with Orton. Orton's matches this year have been, for me, just a treat to watch. It's amazing the amount of character work he puts in. There's a very conscious emphasis on selling, and his smoothness in the ring is always on display. His ability to carry forward a single aspect. For example, here he had damaged his knee, and throughout he was selling that to remind you that he's not in perfect shape. McIntyre, on the other hand, was absolutely brilliant as well. They complement each other really well, which is rare because they're both relatively big and both 6'5" and 250. But I believe Orton's lost some weight, so there was a certain power advantage for McIntyre, and they also played up the fact that McIntyre kicks out at one often, and that was also there. Orton, in general, was a good foil for McIntyre. The one thing that I said in my predictions was that I wanted McIntyre to win, even though I believed that they would have Orton win. The reason I wanted McIntyre to win was that he would always have that clip of him defeating Orton at SummerSlam, or defeating a big-time star, the likes of which he has not beaten yet. So he would have that in like a feather in his cap, always, for all time. And the finish was screwy, like I wanted it to be. Ideally, this was not my official prediction, but in my ideal world, I thought that Orton could have his foot under the rope or something, not intentionally screwy from McIntyre, not intentionally cheating or anything, but unintentionally, but then he wins. This is even better because he won by I believe, what's it called? It's not a surprise roll up, but it's he hooked his shoulders, he hooked both arms, brought Orton's shoulders down from the front, and 1, 2, 3. What is exciting about this match is that they had such momentum shifts with teases of delivering their biggest moves. So McIntyre did not deliver Claymore. Orton had lots of attempts at the RKO, but none of them connected. But each and every one of those moments gives you a ooh-ah moment where you're almost buying into it, but then McIntyre is able to reverse it. And McIntyre sold the gradual realization that he was in the ring with an actual veteran who is still at the top of his game, and the developing respect for that. And then McIntyre, not to a massive degree, but kind of hulks up, and he's able to deal with all this adversity much better, control the pace of the match. All that was done really well. No one connected with their finishes. Orton was trying to go for the punt. The only gripe that I can have with the performance of the match itself is that they telegraphed the fact that the punt was not going to happen because McIntyre got up a little too soon. I think there was it might have been a camera angle miscue in that they showed McIntyre getting up and Orton still foaming at the mouth and getting prepared to deliver the punt, but I knew that it was not going to connect. Thank God, because I thought otherwise they would have, after Shawn Michaels not selling the punt on Raw, they would have Orton connect with a punt, and then McIntyre would kick out, which would kill the most protected move in the entire industry ever, aside from, or along with the Razor's Edge, I believe. So I hope that never happens. But what is interesting now is that McIntyre still can claim he won clean. Orton does not look weak. It was not a squash by any means, and Orton had his moments. Are they going to have the rematch on Sunday, next Sunday, at Payback? That is the thing I want to monitor, because they're also showing Keith Lee to be there tomorrow night on Raw. Why? Why else would you bring Keith Lee? There is no one. There is no heel on the roster now that McIntyre has not beaten before. Seth Rollins has an immense amount of momentum he could carry over to another potential match with McIntyre, but you're not going to give the title to Seth right now. I believe there's a blow-off match with Seth teaming up with Murphy, taking on the Mysterio family. That feud is not over. But what happens with Randy Orton now? Because I want him to win the title. He has to win the title. He's on his greatest run ever, according to so many legends themselves, and you can't just not give him the title, or you can't make it mean nothing. So I'm very curious to see where this leads, because they still have Payback. I could even be fine with Orton winning the title at Survivor Series to drop it back to Drew McIntyre, even at Royal Rumble, or at WrestleMania. If Edge is not back, that also depends. Maybe there's a 3-way WWE Championship pictured brewing provided Edge returns on time for that as well. There's a grudge match with Orton and Edge, and that might still very well happen. Payback, Orton wins. That's what I'm hoping for. Let's see how it goes. And finally, The Fiend versus Braun Strowman. So, what I wanted to see happen, even in the prediction that I said, was that Braun wins. But use Alexa to show viewers, us, that Braun is crossing over. He's turning a leaf. This whole narrative that anyone who comes in contact with the Fiend changes significantly. The commentators just said that, but it was not visible more than Braun just completely going bald and having that beard. So other than the look change, there was not much, because Braun is also not dangerous looking. Okay, sure, he might be dangerous looking, but he's not. His mannerisms are still comical. He's always doing the and all of that. And I am the monster. That's all he says. And typically, historically, when you look at actually intimidating figures, they don't shout all the time. You never heard Undertaker shout for no reason. If he did, it was with a gravelly voice, making a point when he had to emphasize something. Rest in peace. He didn't say, get these hands, or I'm not finished with you. Even though, thankfully, he has not said that so far in this storyline with The Fiend. Either way, I just can't take Braun Strowman seriously, and I think it's also hampered by the fact that he was never supposed to be in this position. He was the last-minute substitute for Roman Reigns after Reigns decided to take some time off because of the coronavirus thing. Anyway, the match itself between Strowman and The Fiend, just great entrance by The Fiend. That's not part of the match, I realize that, but the matches are just, they don't mesh well in the ring, as far as I'm concerned. The matches just prodding, you're just aware that the main offensive weapons are just the finishers, and coming off a match where the finishers were teased and the finishers are much more interesting, and yet they didn't deliver, but they teased it. I'm talking about Orton versus McIntyre. After such a psychology-heavy match where both of them gelled in the ring, having a match where the offensive weapons are just the finishers, it just highlights that aspect way too much for me. So I couldn't enjoy that much. The characters are great. The character is great in that Bray Wyatt's depiction of the Fiend is still fantastic. So that was a joy to watch. That was continuously there. And he won the championship, so that's another one in terms of predictions that I got right. So great. Fiend won after... Okay, this is the finishing sequence of the match. Braun got a box cutter. He sliced open pieces of the ring to expose the wooden portion of the ring beneath the foam. And then he wanted to, I believe, deliver the running power slam with the Fiend so that it's more effective or something. Definitely that. And instead, the Fiend reversed it into 3 Sister Abigails and 1 Uranagi preceding those. 2 or 3, I forget. But that was the finish. And it was, I don't know, it was anticlimactic, and it was not... The payoff was not great enough. It was, of course, it was predictable. You didn't use Alexa Bliss at all for the finish. No shenanigans after having so many cinematic matches. I believe that's also why Bray Wyatt has so many cinematic matches, because, especially with the Fiend character, the amount of moves that he can do are limited. And, of course, Braun Strowman is no signature move machine. He does not have those many anyway. He just does, runs around the ring, gives you a tackles you through the barricade, gives you a running power slam, and has lots of fists and punches that don't knock you out. For a man his size, that should happen. I mean, Big Show has a KO punch and Braun Strowman doesn't. Come on. Anyway, so it was a disappointing match, and then, well, Fiend wins. Logical finish. Great. The championship is on a superstar who actually has some mystique, and who's developing that back after having lost it completely to Goldberg for no reason. But hey, I believe Goldberg brought millions and millions of more viewers to WrestleMania, right? The jury's out on that as well. But anyway, we close the night with Roman Reigns returning to spear Bray Wyatt, and he speared Braun Strowman next, and he says to Braun, "You're no monster without me." I believe he's referring to the fact that they had a feud in 2017 or 18, I believe, where Reigns was the champion and Braun just never won. So Reigns actually has a point. It's right in one of the interviews with Reigns before his return, of course, and after his absence, after his hiatus began. Reigns just said, "Yeah, I'm gonna return and I'm gonna beat everyone up, and that's gonna piss everyone off." I believe that's how it's gonna go. Because the thing is, he hasn't won the championship for that long, but whenever he does return, or whenever he's on the roster, he's somewhere near the championship scene, or he's beating up a babyface, he's beating up a heel mercilessly. You know, the King Corbin feud before his program with Goldberg? That's a typical example. Just no chance of Reigns losing the rivalry, so I think he needs to lose a bit, some nuance to his character maybe, but Reigns' portrayal, he was intense, he seemed to be very confident. I'm excited to see how he's booked. It's obvious he's going to insert himself into the consideration for the Universal Championship. That just remains to be seen. As for SummerSlam, there were, especially with regards to the two World Championship matches, there were so many side pieces that they could have used. And if they're using them, if they're saving them for later stages, consider me happy. But there were so many potential swerves and so many theories that were going around. With Braun Strowman and the Fiend, there was Alexa Bliss, who should have been part of it. Because why else would you make her part of the lead up, the build up to SummerSlam so heavily, if there was just no role of hers in the match itself? I don't think she showed up at SummerSlam at all. There was a commercial with her for promoting some video game. Anyway, so that's that. And as for McIntyre versus Orton, I hope it's not the last one and done, because it didn't seem that way. I believe Orton still needs to win the championship, because this was a fluky win for McIntyre. McIntyre is made man, so he's going to be at the top of the card even after losing the title. I'm still an advocate for that, because there just needs a little more freshening up. I think the brand needs a heel champion to keep things fresh. I know that's not a very popular opinion, but there are a lot of people in Orton's corner here because of the amount of heat he's generated and the amount of momentum he has. The greatest wrestler ever. So, if they're saving the potential storytelling devices, or storytelling directions that they could explore with Ric Flair, that's where it was not used. With Shawn Michaels, that's where it was not used. Triple H, that potential side piece was not even referenced. So there's so much potential with this storyline, because Orton has such a rich history with all of those gentlemen. And with Edge potentially returning, he didn't return. I'm glad if Edge is returning next year, so there's no reason for him to return right now. But the possibilities were so many that the fact that nothing happened, it left the impression that I should be left wanting. I thought that I should be left wanting. But the match itself was genius. The finish, this is what I wanted to see happen, even though I'm a huge advocate for Orton winning the title. But I was happy with it. So we'll see where this leads. Is Keith Lee going to insert himself into championship consideration directly? Because Orton is out of challengers, and you can have a face versus face match, but Keith Lee's coming off of a loss to Karrion Kross at TakeOver 30, so how does that work? Anyway, so I'm excited for Raw tomorrow, and this was a quick recap. Well, nothing quick about this, but this was a recap for SummerSlam 2020. Overall, a decent event. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say it's a 6.5 out of a 10. I might be being generous, but it's mainly to do with predictable yet logical finishes to Bayley, Sasha, Asuka matches, the two matches featuring them, the brilliant quality of the back and forth between McIntyre and Orton, and also Seth and Dominick. The intensity of that matchup was off the charts, and I'm really looking forward to Raw next week, or tomorrow, so that's also there. And another reason to get excited, guess who's back? Who is it? Aleister Black is coming back to Raw. He is a guest on the KO show. Kevin Owens referenced that when he was doing commentary, good commentary, in the Raw Tag Team Championship matchup. So lots to look forward to. I hope things keep getting better. I also am interested about Raw Underground tomorrow. Let's see where sweaty Shane McMahon leads us to. Until next time, it has been an honor. How many predictions did you guys get right or wrong? Please share that in the comments. Let's see how this goes. See you next time.